Caleb only took the overnight motel job because nobody else wanted it. The pay was terrible. The hours destroyed his sleep schedule, and the motel itself sat off a nearly abandoned highway in western Tennessee, where most people only stopped because they were too tired to keep driving. The place was called the Redwood Inn, though there were no redwood trees anywhere near it. Just dead grass, cracked asphalt, and a flickering vacancy sign that buzzed loud enough to hear from the parking lot. It had 30 rooms total. 28 were functional. One was permanently locked after a plumbing collapse years earlier, and one was never supposed to be opened. Caleb learned about room 16 on his second night. The owner, a heavy-set man named Walter, gave the explanation casually while showing him the security monitor setup behind the front desk. 16 stays empty, he said. Caleb barely looked up from the old black and white monitors. Why? Walter scratched his beard. Because I said so. That was the end of the conversation. At first, Caleb assumed it was some legal issue. Mold, water damage. Maybe somebody died in there once and Walter didn't want guests asking questions. Motels always had stories, especially cheap ones. The overnight shifts were usually dead after midnight. Caleb spent most nights drinking gas station coffee and watching static-covered security footage while trucks hissed past outside on the highway. The motel attracted strange people sometimes. Couples fighting in parking lots, drunk men wandering barefoot, travelers who paid cash and avoided eye contact. But around 3 a.m., things always settled into silence. That was when Caleb first heard the knocking. 3 soft knocks. Not on the front office door, somewhere deeper in the building. He looked up from his phone and listened. Nothing. Then again. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. The security monitors showed empty walkways, room lights off. No movement. Caleb grabbed the flashlight Walter kept under the counter and stepped outside. The night air smelled like wet pavement and cigarettes. He walked the first-floor hallway slowly, checking windows as he passed. Nothing. Most of the guests were asleep. A TV glowed blue behind one curtain. Ice machine humming. Air conditioners rattling. Then he reached room 16. The knocking stopped. The door sat at the far corner of the building, separated slightly from the other rooms like it had been added later.
No room number on the door, just faded paint where the numbers used to be. Caleb stood there for a second. Something about the hallway felt quieter near that room, like the motel sounds just stopped. No buzzing lights, no highway noise, nothing. He leaned closer. That was when he heard breathing inside. Not loud, not dramatic, just slow human breathing. Caleb stepped back immediately. Walter had said the room was empty. He stared at the handle. The old brass lock looked rusted shut. No lights under the door, no movement. Then his radio crackled loudly against his belt and nearly made him jump out of his skin. "Front desk," Walter's voice said. "Where are you?" Caleb exhaled hard. "Outside. Thought I heard something." A pause. Then Walter asked, "You near 16? Caleb looked at the door again. "Yeah." Another silence. "Come back inside." The way he said it bothered Caleb more than the breathing had. Not angry, not panicked. Just immediate. Like a parent telling a child to step away from traffic. Caleb returned to the office and found Walter already there waiting beside the coffee machine, fully dressed, despite it being nearly 4 in the morning. "You heard breathing?" Walter asked. Caleb nodded. Walter stared at him for several seconds before speaking again. "Don't go near that room again. That room isn't empty." Walter didn't answer immediately. Then he said something Caleb would keep replaying in his head for the next 2 years. "It's empty during the day." After that, Walter refused to explain further. Caleb almost quit right then, but he needed the money. And honestly, curiosity started getting to him. The next few nights were normal. No knocking, no breathing, nothing unusual. Caleb started convincing himself exhaustion had messed with his head. Then came the woman in room 12. She checked in alone just after midnight during a thunderstorm. Mid-30s, nervous, kept glancing over her shoulder while filling out paperwork. Caleb noticed bruising near her wrist but didn't ask about it. People came to roadside motels for reasons you didn't question. At around 2:40 a.m., she came rushing into the office barefoot and crying. "There's someone in my room," she whispered. Caleb stood immediately. "What?" "There's a man standing in the bathroom." She looked genuinely terrified. Caleb grabbed the flashlight again and followed her across the parking lot through heavy rain. Room 12's door stood slightly open. The woman refused to go back inside. Caleb entered alone. Bathroom empty, closet empty. No signs of forced entry. Then he noticed the bathroom window open, rain blowing through the screen. He checked outside but found nothing except muddy footprints leading across the parking lot. Toward room 16, Caleb stopped following them halfway there. The flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. Because room 16's door was open, just barely, maybe 3 inches. Darkness inside. Complete darkness. He told himself Walter must have finally unlocked it, but then he noticed something worse. The muddy footprints only went one direction, into the room, not out. Caleb backed away slowly and returned to the woman. He lied and told her somebody probably tried breaking into cars outside. She left before sunrise, never checked out properly, just gone. The next morning, Caleb confronted Walter. "There's someone using that room." Walter looked exhausted, like he already knew exactly what Caleb was about to say. "No, there isn't. I saw the door open." Walter slammed his coffee cup down harder than necessary. "You saw nothing." "Then explain the footprints." Walter rubbed both hands over his face. For the first time since Caleb met him, the man actually looked scared. Finally, he said, 20 years ago, a man rented that room for 3 months. Caleb stayed quiet. He never let housekeeping inside, paid cash every Friday. Quiet guy. Then one night, guests started complaining about noises. Walter stared at the desk while talking. Scratching sounds, crying, somebody begging for help. "What happened?" Walter swallowed. "We opened the room." The office suddenly felt colder. Walter continued carefully, like saying it wrong mattered somehow. There was another door cut into the wall beside the bathroom. Caleb frowned. "What?" He'd built it himself. Walter's eyes looked distant now. There was a crawl space between the motel walls, barely large enough to move through. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. Walter lowered his voice. "We found women's clothing in there. IDs, toothbrushes, suitcases." Caleb said nothing. "We never found the women." A long silence followed. Rain tapped softly against the office windows outside. "What happened to the man?" Caleb finally asked. Walter looked toward the security monitors. "He disappeared the same night." Caleb laughed nervously. "So why not demolish the room?" Walter answered immediately. "Because after we sealed it, people started seeing him again." That should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it sounded honest, and that was worse. Walter explained that every overnight employee eventually heard something near room 16. Breathing, knocking, a voice asking quietly for help. One employee opened the room after hearing a woman crying inside. He quit the next morning and never explained what he saw. Another employee disappeared completely 6 years earlier. Walter stopped renting the surrounding rooms after that. Rooms 14 through 18 remained permanently vacant. Caleb finally understood why that side of the motel always looked darker, like part of the building had been abandoned without anyone mentioning it. He should have quit. But people always think fear comes with certainty. It doesn't. Sometimes fear comes with embarrassment, with logic, with the need to prove something makes sense. So Caleb stayed, and 3 nights later, he made the mistake that ruined his life. At 3:17 a.m., the office phone rang. Not unusual, except the caller ID displayed room 16. Caleb stared at it for almost 10 seconds before answering. Static, then breathing, slow, wet. He whispered, "Hello?" A woman answered, very quietly, "Please don't let him back in." The line disconnected. Caleb froze. Then came the knocking. Not distant this time, right outside the office door. 3 slow knocks. He looked up immediately. Nobody there. But one of the security monitors had changed. Camera 6. The hallway near room 16. A person stood motionless outside the door. Tall, thin, facing the camera. The image quality was terrible, but Caleb could still make out the shaved head and the smile. Then the figure lifted one arm slowly and pointed directly toward the camera, toward him. The office lights suddenly shut off. Everything went black except the monitors. Caleb heard movement outside, not footsteps, crawling, something dragging itself slowly along the motel walkway. He locked the office door instinctively and backed away from the windows. Then came a voice, right outside the glass, soft, calm. "You opened it." Caleb couldn't breathe. The voice sounded normal. That was the horrifying part. Not monstrous, not distorted, just human. "You let me back inside." The security monitors flickered violently. One by one, the camera feeds went black, until only camera 6 remained. Room 16's door now stood wide open, the hallway empty. Then something moved inside the darkness. Not walking, crawling low against the floor, fast. The office window exploded inward. Caleb ran. He didn't grab his keys, didn't call Walter. He sprinted through the back exit into the rain and kept running until he reached the highway. Police searched the motel before sunrise. They found the office destroyed. The security system ripped apart, the glass shattered. But no signs of forced entry anywhere else. And room 16 was locked, still rusted shut. Police assumed Caleb suffered some kind of breakdown from exhaustion. Walter closed the motel 2 months later. The building still sits there today off Highway 47, slowly rotting beside the trees. Most of the windows are boarded up now, but locals still talk about the lights, especially near the far end of the first floor, room 16, the room that was never supposed to open. Because sometimes, according to people who've passed the building late at night, you can see someone standing behind the window, completely still, waiting for somebody to let him back inside.